No one tells you this, but your mind won't save you by itself. It's not naturally strong. It's not automatically focused. Left alone, it becomes a storm of doubt, distraction, self-sabotage, emotional spirals. Most men assume their mindset will sharpen with age. That confidence will arrive. That clarity will just come. But it doesn't, because a powerful mind isn't something you're given. It's something you train, like a muscle, like a weapon. And if you don't train it, it trains you. It pulls you into comfort, into weakness, into small decisions that add up to a small life. Then one day, you wake up and realize your potential didn't die, got buried under thoughts you never learned to control. That's the part no one prepares you for. School trains your memory. Work trains your obedience. But no one ever sits you down and says, here's how to lead your thoughts. Here's how to hold your frame under pressure. Here's how to walk through life with mental clarity and personal gravity. And that's why most men stay stuck. Not because they're lazy, but because they never knew strength was something they had to build deliberately. So if you've ever felt like your mind was running you, pulling you into habits, reactions, or regrets, you need this. Not because you're broken, but because no one ever handed you the manual for mental strength. This isn't a motivational speech. It's a blueprint, a mental gym, a framework for training the most important muscle you have: your focus, your response, your ability to stay calm when the heat rises. No hype, no shortcuts, just structure, just self-respect earned in silence and repetition. Because unlocking your full potential isn't about waiting for life to change. It's about training your mind until you do. Because if you don't train your mind, someone else will. And years from now, when life feels smaller than it should have been, you'll know exactly why. And if you're ready to stop drifting, then say it. In your mind, out loud, or write it below. One sentence: I'm ready to train my mind. That's your first first proof. Let the world see it so you can finally believe it. The invisible resume. You won't need a title to tell the world who you are. Your actions already do. Every moment, every decision, every small commitment you either honor or abandon, those are the real credentials. Not your degree, not your job, not the followers or the awards. But what you do when no one's keeping score, that's the part most people never see. And that's the part that defines everything. You think people will remember what you said in the meeting? They won't, but they'll remember the way you held your ground without trembling. You think success comes from grand moments. It doesn't. It comes from private ones. From mornings when you got up without motivation, from nights when you chose to keep your word over your comfort. You don't build potential in the spotlight. You reveal it there. But it gets built in silence. Every time you wake up early when you could have slept in, every time you go to the gym when no one's looking, every time you say no to what's easy and yes to what's aligned, you cast a vote. And you're not voting for what you want. You're voting for who you are. You're casting the identity of the man you're becoming, one silent act at a time. That's why most people never transform, because they're waiting for the world to notice before they commit. They're waiting for applause before they move. But a man who trains his mind doesn't need noise to move forward. Immobile, precisely because he understands something most people ignore. Real change doesn't happen in big moments, it happens in boring ones. In repetitions, no one celebrates. In rituals, no one claps for. Your potential isn't locked away in some future opportunity. It's buried beneath the choices you make when you feel like giving up. It's hidden in the weight you choose to lift when your body says no. It's in the word you keep when it would be easier to break it. These choices form your invisible resume. Not for them, for you. Because the test will come, pressure will rise. And when it does, you won't have time to get ready. You'll default to what you've been practicing all along. So the question isn't, are you ready for success? The real question is, what kind of man are you rehearsing to be when no one's watching? When no one's validating? When no one cares but you? That's where power is born. In your private discipline, in your unseen consistency, in the weight of decisions no one will ever thank you for except the future version of you who needed someone to show up today. Don't wait to become him. Train until there's no gap between the man you say you are and the man you act like. Because every quiet act is a declaration, every ordinary decision is a carving on the wall of your identity. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. The first reaction is the real mirror. You'll never know the truth about yourself by asking calm questions in quiet rooms. You'll find it in the split-second reaction when life hits you in the mouth. When someone disrespects you in front of others. When the deal falls apart after months of sacrifice. When she leaves without closure. That first surge of emotion, that's not the version you've rehearsed. That's the one that's been hiding behind discipline, behind strategy, behind your morning routine, and your motivational quotes. That's the real you, unfiltered. And it's the version you need to meet if you ever want to rise beyond it. Most men spend their lives managing appearances. They train their public image, but neglect their private programming. They know how to look calm. But inside, they're one insult away from rage. One delay away from panic. One failure away from collapse. They think the danger is in what happens outside. It's not. The real threat is the storm inside the one they've never learned to face because they've always covered it with distractions, justifications, or performance. But a man who trains his mind knows the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is what's automatic. It's the spark of ego, the echo of past pain, the flash of insecurity disguised as dominance. Response is what's earned. It's the pause, the breath, the space you create between what just happened and what you choose to become in that moment. And that space, tiny as it may be, where your potential either expands or collapses. It's easy to be calm when you're not being tested. It's easy to look strong when no one's questioning you. But the man who can hold still when chaos erupts, the man who doesn't flinch when disrespected, the man who lets silence do the talking, that's not just strength. That's training. And it's not glamorous. No one applauds you for staying composed when you could have snapped. No one congratulates you for choosing logic over pride. But your future self will. Because every time you override your instinct to lash out, you rewire your identity. You become a man who isn't controlled by emotion, but commands it. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't bite, that's not weakness. That's emotional jujitsu. When you get bad news and don't spiral, that's not indifference. That's internal command. When your first reaction is anger and you recognize it, breathe. and choose a wiser path that's not suppression. That's mastery. You don't train your mind to escape emotion. You train it to translate emotion into clarity. Anger can become action. Fear can become focus. Disappointment can become fuel. But only if you pause long enough to own your reaction instead of being owned by it. Because in the end, your first reaction is a mirror. It shows you who's really in charge. Your pain, your pride, or your principles. So the next time life hits you raw and fast, don't just survive the moment. Study it. That flash of reaction is data. It's showing you the gap between who you are and who you're becoming. Close that gap. Be honest. What's one reaction you regret not handling better? Share it below. You're not alone. That moment isn't weakness, it's a mirror. And seeing it is the first step to taking back your power. Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Seneca. The space between thought and action. Most men think strength is in how fast they act. That decisiveness means dominance. That hesitation is weakness. But the wisest men in history, the calmest warriors, the most resilient leaders, they all learned one thing. Your power doesn't come from speed. It comes from the space you create before you move. The space between what you feel and what you choose to do. That space is everything. It's the hinge of who you were and who you're about to become. The average man gets a thought, gets a feeling, and fires. No filter, no pause, no process. Someone says something disrespectful, and he bites back. Someone cuts him off, and he explodes. The meeting doesn't go his way, and he spirals. But the man who trains his mind, he doesn't just react. He watches, not passively, but with intent. He notices the emotion rise, sees the thought form, hears the old trigger echo, and he doesn't obey. He observes. Then he decides. That decision, in that tiny gap most men skip over, is where leadership is born. It's where masculinity matures. It's where self-respect is forged. Because anyone can act, but not everyone can choose their action. Not everyone can stare down the pull of impulse and still walk the higher road. That takes practice. That takes silence. That takes restraint wrapped in awareness. You don't train your mind to become a machine. You train it to become deliberate. To pause when every part of you wants to pounce. To breathe when your heart is pounding. To think clearly in the fog of ego. That's the real work. And no, it won't feel heroic. In fact, it will feel like weakness at first because it's not glamorous to stop and think. It's not sexy to hesitate in a world addicted to immediacy. But that pause, that breath, that's what separates a man with discipline from a man with excuses. That's where your identity starts to bend towards something greater than your instincts. The Stoics called it prohairesis, the faculty of choice. It's not just about self-control. It's about aligning your action with your intention, even when your emotions demand something else. Especially then, you may feel anger, you may feel shame, you may feel fear. That's not failure. That's feedback. The test isn't whether those feelings appear. The test is what you do with them. Will you throw them forward like fire or filter them like fuel? Because that space between thought and action is a forge. It doesn't burn you. It builds you. When you use it right, It becomes the most powerful tool you have, not to suppress emotion, but to transform it. That's how you train your mind. Not by trying to be calm all the time, but by inserting just enough stillness between stimulus and response to make sure your next move is yours, not your past's, not your pains, not your programmings. So next time you feel the rush, the spark, the heat rising, don't act. Wait. Listen to what your first impulse is trying to say, and then choose differently. Because every time you do, you become less of a prisoner and more of a master. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. Your body language is a declaration. You speak long before you open your mouth, before you say a word, before you explain who you are. Before you get the chance to prove anything, you've already told the room everything it needs to know. Through your posture, through your eyes, through the way you enter the space. Not trying to dominate it, but refusing to shrink. That's body language. And it's not just communication. It's identity in motion. A man who has trained his mind doesn't need to announce his power. You feel it. In his stillness, in the absence of nervous energy, in the way he stands, not stiff, not slouched, but grounded, like a tree with deep roots and nothing to hide. He doesn't rush to fill silence. He doesn't explain what doesn't need to be justified. His presence says what words can't. I know who I am. I've earned it in silence. I don't need your approval to exist fully. Yes, most people are walking apologies. Their shoulders cave. Their eyes dart. Their steps hesitate because they're carrying doubt in their spine and insecurity in their breath. They've rehearsed what to say, but not how to be. But your body can't lie. It will always tell the truth of your training. If your rituals are weak, your posture will betray you. If your discipline is shaky, your eyes will flinch. If your self-respect is borrowed, your stance will wobble when tested. But if you've done the work, if you've trained in the quiet, if you've honored your word when no one was watching, your body will carry a different frequency. Not arrogance, not ego, but weight, presence. Kaum command. And here's the truth. People don't respond to what you say nearly as much as how you show up. You can say all the right things, wear all the right clothes, check all the boxes, but if your body says, I'm uncertain, the world believes that because we're not just verbal beings, we're instinctual. We read quiz, we pick up energy, and your energy is shaped by repetition, by rituals, by the way you carry yourself on the days no one is watching. So yes, your body is talking, every day, every hour. The question is, what is it declaring? Do your shoulders say defeat or discipline? Do your eyes say fear or focus? Does your walk say you're avoiding life or engaged with it? You can't fake this. You can't posture your way into confidence. You have to earn it by becoming a man who respects himself in the dark, by doing the reps when no one's counting, by facing the mirror and holding eye contact with the man looking back. Because once you've done that, once your choices have aligned with your values enough times, your body becomes the proof. You don't need to perform. You simply are. This is what trained presence looks like. Not volume, not bravado, but composure under pressure, stillness in storms, the kind of quiet posture that says, I've been through things that would have broken other meaned. I'm still here. Azro, that's how you move. when you know who you are. And you don't just walk into a room, you shift it. What you do echoes in eternity, dramatized from Marcus Aurelius. The rehearsal behind every victory. Victory is never spontaneous. It may look sudden to the world, like a breakout, a surge, a moment of greatness out of nowhere. But what they see is just the final echo. What they don't see is the script you've been rehearsing in private for months, years, maybe decades. They don't see the early mornings where you showed up tired, but still moved. The quiet nights where you said no to comfort and yes to your code. They don't see the reps, the rituals, the rewiring. They just see the resultant, call it talent. But it was never talent. It was preparation paid forward. Success isn't something you chase once. It's something you train for daily without applause, without feedback, without proof that it's working. And that's the part that breaks most men, because modern life has conditioned us to expect results fast, to get visible payoff for every effort. But mastery doesn't work that way. The kind of strength that lasts, the kind of victory that reshapes you from the inside, only arrives after long seasons of unseen discipline. You train, not for the world to notice, but for you to notice, to look yourself in the mirror and know, I'm not guessing anymore. I've earned this clarity. Every day is a rehearsal. Every conversation, every choice, every quiet morning where you decide to lead yourself before you lead anyone else. That's the training ground. You don't become a man of impact when things are easy. You become him when it's hard. And you still repeat the process. That's how confidence is built. Not through compliments, but through repetition. Not through external validation, but through internal congruence. You tell yourself what kind of man you are, and then you prove it. In small, invisible ways that no one will ever congratulate you for. And here's the truth. When the moment of pressure comes, it's already too late to prepare. You won't rise to the occasion. You'll fall to the level of your training. And that training doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens when you're alone, when quitting would be easy, when slacking off would go unnoticed. That's where the battle is either lost or won. Most men dream of performance. Few men commit to the rehearsal, because rehearsal is boring. It's repetitive. It demands humility. You don't get to look impressive, you get to be consistent. And consistency isn't glamorous, but it's sacred, because over time, it turns your habits into instinct, your discipline into identity, and your pain into power. You'll know you're becoming something different when you stop needing a reason to keep going. When showing up becomes part of your nervous system, when keeping your word no longer feels heroic, just feels normal. That's what separates the man who occasionally wins from the man who becomes undeniable. It's not his genetics. It's not luck. It's that he's rehearsed who he wants to be so many times that when life demands him to show up, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't shrink. He simply steps forward and delivers because he's already lived that moment 1,000 times in silence. What's one quiet ritual or habit you've been doing consistently, even if no one notices? Share it below. Let others see that real progress starts in silence. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. Marcus Aurelius. When silence becomes strategy. There comes a moment in every man's journey when he realizes noise is not power, reaction is not dominance. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the strongest. And the man who speaks least often sees the most. In a world addicted to instant responses, immediate opinions, and emotional outbursts, silence is not weakness. Silence is leverage. It's the weapon most people forget exists because they're too busy trying to be heard. But the man who trains his mind, he chooses silence. Not as retreat, but as control. He doesn't silence himself because he's unsure. He silences himself because he's choosing where his energy goes. Because he understands this brutal truth. Not every battle deserves a response. Not every insult needs a counterattack. Not every question deserves an answer. Some things are best left unanswered, not because you couldn't respond, but because you no longer need to. This is where true strength begins, not in how loud you can speak, but in how still you can remain when the situation demands chaos. Silence isn't the absence of thought, it's the presence of discipline. It's you saying, I know my value, and I won't spill it recklessly. Most men chase reactions to prove they're alive. But you slow down. You observe. You withhold. Because you know how to use silence like a scalpel knot to avoid the world. But to cut through it with precision. The man who knows how to pause before he speaks. The man who can endure discomfort without explaining himself. The man who doesn't answer every provocation that man commands a room without raising his voice. Because people feel his presence. They sense he's not performing. He's watching, calculating, conserving, waiting for the right moment to strike. If he strikes at all. And when he does speak, everyone listens. You want to unlock your full potential? Train yourself to not react. Let them think you didn't notice the disrespect. Let them think you're passive. Let them mistake your silence for softness. That illusion is your advantage. Because while they waste energy trying to provoke you, trying to read you, trying to get a rise out of you, you're still focused and deadly clear. You've already won because you didn't give them what they wanted. Silence isn't just emotional control. It's strategy. It gives you space to think when others are stuck in loops of ego. It gives you room to analyze when they're distracted by drama. And it gives you an edge they can't measure because they can't predict a man who says nothing. So the next time the world demands a reaction, give them your stillness instead. Let your silence unsettle the loud. Let your restraint expose the insecure. Let your calm become the mirror they can't escape. That's what mastery looks like. Not in dominance, but in discretion, because a man who trains his mind doesn't need to fight every battle. He simply chooses the ones where his silence is more terrifying than his words. Speech is silver. Silence is golden. Zeno of Citium, proverb origine. You become what you endure with grace. Pain doesn't break a man. It reveals him. Pressure doesn't destroy potential, it carves it. And the seasons that feel the most brutal, they're not setbacks. They're forging fires. You don't become strong because life went your way. You become strong because you stayed in the fight when it didn't. Not with bitterness, not with a clenched jaw and a need for applause, but with grace, with composure, with an understanding that the hard things are not a detour, they're the curriculum. Most men think resilience is about pushing harder, proving something, forcing outcomes. But the truth is colder, more sacred. Resilience is not about muscle, it's about poise. It's about standing in the storm, fully aware of your fear, your doubt, your pain, and still choosing to move with intention, still choosing to carry yourself like a man, even when your world feels like it's collapsing. Because here's the reality. You are becoming whatever you're learning to endure. If you survive chaos with anger, you become more reactive. If you endure stress with panic, you become more fragile. But if you choose stillness in the middle of pain, if you meet difficulty with quiet strength, not desperation, you start to change at the cellular level. You train your nervous system to stay grounded. You program your identity to remain calm when others collapse. You earn the right to lead not through words, but through what you've survived without losing yourself. That's the transformation most men avoid. They want results without refinement. They want the crown without the crucible. But the man who embraces his suffering with grace doesn't just become stronger, he becomes unshakable. Because grace under fire isn't weakness, it's command. The kind of command that doesn't come from books or speeches, but from walking through hell and refusing to let it deform your character. Endurance isn't passive. It's active self-respect. It's refusing to shrink, to complain, to collapse. It's the silent choice to remain upright in the face of things that were designed to bend you. And the longer you endure well, the more you choose composure instead of chaos. Logic. Instead of lashing out, the more your mind upgrades into something fewer men ever achieve: emotional sovereignty. You become a man who is no longer at the mercy of circumstances, a man who responds with strategy, not suffering. A man who carries invisible weight with visible integrity. And make no mistake, people will notice. They won't always understand it, but they'll feel it. The calm, the power, the quiet respect you've earned. Not through dominance, but through restraint. Through choosing grace when vengeance would have been easier. Through choosing discipline when quitting would have been justified. Through choosing dignity in the moments no one would have blamed you for losing it. So, if life is testing you right now, good. Stay in it. Stand tall. Don't beg for escape. Look it in the eye and say, "You won't make me bitter. You won't make me small. I will outlast you, and I'll walk through you without losing who I am." Because that's how potential is unlocked. Not in ease, but in elegant endurance. If you can bear it, do not complain. If it is unbearable, it will soon end. Marcus Aurelius. Before you leave, answer this in the comments. What's one habit you know you need to train, but haven't yet? Writing it down isn't just for me. It's for you to make it real, to name it, to claim it. Let this be your first rep. The first act of discipline, because clarity begins with commitment. And you never know who might read your comment and finally find the courage to start their own. If you've made it this far, then this wasn't just a video, it was a turning point. Something inside you recognized a deeper truth. That potential isn't handed to you. It's earned through repetition, silence, and discipline. When no one's watching, you don't train your mind to impress others, you train it so you can walk into any room, any storm, any challenge, and still know exactly who you are. And if this spoke to something buried beneath the surface, you're not alone. There are thousands of men right now, men who are tired of being ignored, tired of performing, tired of carrying quiet pain with no direction, who are searching for the very thing you've just found. When you subscribe, you're not just helping yourself, you're making this message easier to find for men like you, men who don't need noise. They need clarity. Men who don't want pity, they want power. By doing that, you're joining a brotherhood of discipline, not flash, a movement of men who choose structure over chaos, purpose over pressure, and stillness over reaction. So, don't think of this as the end. Think of it as the signal to start walking differently from today forward. You've trained enough in the dark. Now it's time to live with light behind your eyes. And if this message is part of your story now, then welcome. You're exactly where you belong.